And we'll go through some of that. I cheated. Usually I don't put this slide up until I ask you the question. Why international trade? Who guesses what's the number one GDP generator in the U.S.? What's number one? What is it we do best?
Louder. Consume.
We're a retail consuming entity. It's called retail and services. It's approximately 60% of our GDP. Guess what's number two? International or trade. I don't think anyone understands outside of the industry. Guess what's number three? Healthcare. Is healthcare important to us? Exceptionally. Trade is number two. It's a well-hidden secret. We want to capitalize on that. So, do we focus on domestic trade or do we focus on international trade? If I look at the chart behind me, hopefully domestic's going, I think, if I'm in the right orientation. But the focus is international trade has been growing in double digits throughout the world and anywhere between 5 and 10% per year on both of our coasts. A lot of that is because of our consuming nation, correct? But it's also because a lot of our forests, a lot of our gravel yards, etc., have been consumed, and we need to replenish them. The port gives us the opportunity to do that. Those are some of the growth rates looking back in 4-year horizons by the AAPA, American Association of Port Authorities. It's not a U.S.-based program. The Port Authority is from Canada down to and including South America, so it takes a look at the entire western horizon. That number surprises a lot of people. The Delaware River through the South Jersey Port Corporation has been and was growing at the same volume as significant entities throughout the rest of the U.S. When you look at that, that ranges again anywhere from 6 to 10% plus per year growth. Is that important to us? The forecast put together by the DRPA over the next 20 years. That's the Delaware River Port Authority, and it looked at annual percent growth rates for 660 cargoes that could move on the Delaware River. This is where we were in the mid-2005 time frame. Approximately 20 million tons moving on the Delaware River, serviced by not only the Port Corporation, but also Delaware and Philadelphia or Pennsylvania. These are annual compound growth rates. What you do is you look at each of the different commodities and you forecast what kind of growth rates would be likely or anticipated. Some have negative growth rates, some have exceptional growth rates. But when you look at all 160 based on a 10-year horizon dating back into the mid-1990s, when you take an aggregate, you have a high forecast, a moderate forecast, and a low forecast. The projection is that we're going from 19 million tons handled on the Delaware River to anywhere between 26 and just short of 45. That's somewhere between a 2 to a 3-fold increase on the amount of cargo that we can handle on this river. The question is, do you want to handle that cargo on the river? Because in order to handle the cargo, you need to have the facilities. What is when I talk about bulk and break bulk? Over here. Okay? Kevin, why don't you guys walk through real quickly. Kevin, Director of Operations for the South Jersey Port Corporation. What we'd like to do is to give the community an idea of what the port handles on any one given day. It's been termed that which you can feel, touch, or pick up. What you wear, your shoes, your TVs, that all used to be bulk and break bulk commodities. But nowadays, because they're higher value entities, they put them inside a container, and those are the containers that you see going up and down the street. In this particular case, Kevin, why don't you give them an idea? There's the rubber, which comes in ships from anywhere from 10,000 ton to, in the case of slag ships or scrap, they come in 50,000 ton. Kevin, I don't think I can get over there, so
speak loudly. Doesn't work.
Well, what you have is a combination of elements. That's a bag of cocoa beans. The cocoa bean comes in both from Africa as well as Indonesia. It comes in year-round. Ultimately, as Kevin's holding up, there's a Blummer chocolate bar which the cocoa beans come in. Ultimately, there's a value-added service to tear apart the bags, fumigate the bags, de-shuck the bags, and then you can even get into the grinding and milling and polishing of the bean before creating it into the chocolate. And Blummer ultimately is a tenant of CICT, which is an entity of Camden International Commodities, which has the leasehold on port property. Cashew nuts, ultimately the nuts are brought in bagged. How about the salt, which we all know about road salt, comes in 30,000 ton ships. The favorite one to talk about, Kevin, is handling the Grand Stem or slag. Let us give you an idea of what happens. Again, a slag ship, these are the ships you see that are about 700 feet long, moving slowly across the horizon. When they come into the Broadway terminal, it's unloaded in approximately 4 or 5 days. And that's working 16, 18 hours a day. What's the size bucket? How many ton bucket? 30? 22 cubic yards. Your typical truck going down the highway handles 14 yards. So this is a bucket that handles one of those trucks and a half, and it's working consistently for 16 to 18 hours a day for 4 to 5 days to unload that ship. Gives you an idea of the size of that ship. Ultimately, though, that commodity comes into Broadway. They built a standalone special purpose facility to process that facility, to take it from the slag into Grand Stem, which is ultimately a byproduct for concrete known as cement. So what you're basically doing is using slag, which is a byproduct of the steel industry in Europe, comes across, reused into cement for us so that we don't have to be beholden, if you would, to just limestone use. So we're using a recycled product, using it to create our concrete, which makes our sidewalks and everything else in this region. It's a way of utilizing a different approach for a different commodity to make cost-effective construction in South Jersey. Also, one of the neat little pieces of that, Kevin's holding up the plywood. The South Jersey Port Corp is the largest plywood handler in the U.S. Over approximately 500,000 ton a year typically, and we all know what the plywood goes for. And then the last one that we want to talk about is the scrap, or recycled metal, if you would, otherwise known as scrap metal. Ultimately, we handle a great deal of steel also at the port. Again, 400,000 tons? Steel, foils, finished steel? 600,000 to 700,000 tons of steel. That steel comes through the South Jersey arena and moves to create canning, which we have every day for all of our different commodities. But it also goes through to create refrigerators and cars, etc., that comes through the Midwest. At least it used to make cars. Now, what ultimately happens when those commodities come to their end, what do? We recycle them now. That recycled product ends up getting shredded and then put back on the ship, again, a 50 to 60 to 70,000 ton ship, sent back out either to India, Turkey, or other locations where it is smelted down, reused, and comes back as the steel product. So in this particular discussion that we've gone through, two different commodities to show the recycling of product. Very creative, and it's that kind of ingenuity that we want to bring to the Port of Paulsboro in order to attract the commodities that create the jobs. Why? This graphic behind you. Sorry, that was about 5 minutes to try and get to this graphic. There's a lot of different ports on the East Coast. What this graphic tries to show you is that the Delaware River has been, throughout its history, and continues to be what's known as a niche port operator. It takes special trained labor and equipment to handle these special types of commodities. We have that labor here. We want to continue to utilize that labor and build upon the niche that is southern New Jersey.